A single, haunting piano note hangs in the air, a stark contrast to the distant, rhythmic rumble of artillery. Black and white archival footage flickers. American soldiers, grimy and weary, advance through a bombed-out European village. The camera focuses on a young GI, his face a mask of hardened exhaustion. His eyes, however, hold a flicker of something else, a profound weariness that transcends the battlefield. A voiceover deep and resonant begins. Narrator: for 6 long years the world bled. From the sun-drenched beaches of Normandy to the frozen forests of the Ardennes, a generation was consumed by a conflict of unprecedented brutality. The enemy was not an idea, but a person, a uniform, a face. And as the final days of the war dawned, a new and startling confrontation loomed. The victors of history were about to face a surprising enemy, German women, captured not on the battlefield, but in the ruins of their own country. The narrative we've been told is simple: good versus evil. But what happens when the enemy isn't the monster you were promised? What happens when you look into their eyes and see not a fanatic, but a reflection of your own shared humanity? The soundscape shifts. The piano note fades, replaced by the persistent muffled churn of a Jeep's engine. The screen fills with a view from the vehicle's perspective, bouncing along a rutted dirt road. The landscape is a somber mosaic of war's aftermath: shattered trees, skeletal remains of buildings, and the deep scars of tank treads. The year is 1945, and the relentless march of the Allied forces is drawing to a close. Private Benjamin "Ben" Carter, a young American combat engineer from a quiet town in Ohio, sits in the passenger seat, his helmeted head resting against the frame. He's seen too much. The innocent cheer he'd carried with him across the Atlantic has long since been ground to dust beneath the weight of relentless combat. He grips the cold steel of his rifle, its presence a constant grim reminder of his purpose. Next to him, Sergeant Jack Riley, a hardened veteran of the North African and Italian campaigns, stares ahead, his jaw tight. He chews on a cold cigar butt, the unlit tobacco a bitter taste on his tongue. They are part of the forward elements of the U.S. 7th Army, pushing relentlessly into southern Germany. The air is thick with the metallic scent of cordite and the lingering stench of death. Narrator: the psychological toll of the war was an invisible wound, far deeper than any shrapnel could inflict. For young men like Ben Carter, the enemy was an abstract concept forged in propaganda and the grim reality of combat. They were taught to see a monolithic force, devoid of individuality. Every German soldier was a Nazi, a faceless cog in the war machine. This dehumanization was a necessary tool for survival, a way to justify the horror of taking a life. But as the front lines collapsed and pockets of resistance crumbled, the nature of their mission changed. It was no longer about advancing or seizing ground. It was about cleaning up the wreckage. And in the detritus of the Third Reich, they were about to encounter a new and unexpected reality. The Jeep rounds a bend, and a scene of organized chaos unfolds. A small makeshift enclosure has been set up beside the road, a fence of barbed wire hastily strung between a few remaining trees. Within the enclosure, a small group of German soldiers, their uniforms torn and dirty, stand with their hands behind their heads, guarded by a few GIs. But what catches Ben's attention is not the soldiers. It's the women. A smaller, separate group stands huddled together, their faces a mixture of fear, defiance, and utter exhaustion. They are not in uniform, their clothes civilian and threadbare. Some clutch small bundles, their only possessions. Their eyes, wide and watchful, follow the movements of the American soldiers with a mixture of apprehension and a kind of hardened resignation. Ben's mind, conditioned for combat, struggles to process the image. These weren't the enemy he'd trained to fight. These were women. The contrast is jarring, a silent violation of the clear moral lines he'd drawn for himself. He glances at Jack, who seems equally taken aback, the cold cigar butt now forgotten in his hand. The unwritten rules of war, the codes of combat, had never prepared them for this. The scene before them was a silent, profound challenge to everything they thought they knew about their purpose. Narrator: the military had protocols for dealing with male prisoners of war, but female combatants, or as was more often the case, female auxiliaries and civilians caught in the sweep of the war, were an entirely different category. They were a moral and logistical conundrum. Some were members of the SS Helferinnen, the female auxiliaries of the SS. Others were part of the Flakhelferinnen, the anti-aircraft auxiliaries. Still more were simply civilians caught up in the chaos, forced into auxiliary roles, or simply trying to survive in the rubble of a fallen empire. For the GIs, the sight of them was deeply disorienting. They were taught to see the enemy as a singular, malevolent entity, a force to be neutralized. But these women complicated the simple narrative of victory. They weren't fighting. They were simply surviving. Their presence forced the Americans to confront the human cost of the war on a deeper, more personal level. Ben and Jack dismount the jeep, their boots crunching on the gravel. They are tasked with assisting the officer in charge with processing the prisoners. As they approach, the air crackles with tension. The women watch them with a wary intensity, their bodies pulled taut like coiled springs. Ben finds his gaze drawn to one woman in particular. She is younger than the others, perhaps only a few years his senior. Her face is smudged with dirt, and a thick braid of blonde hair has come loose, framing a face that is both beautiful and etched with sorrow. Her eyes, a startling blue, meet his. There is no hatred in them, only a bone-deep weariness that he recognizes in his own reflection. For a moment, a profound silence falls between them. The noise of the other soldiers, the distant rumble of trucks, all of it fades into a meaningless drone. He sees her not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as a person, a woman, a human being. The simple act of recognition is a small, quiet earthquake in his soul. He feels a powerful, unexpected urge to do something, anything, to break the oppressive silence. He lowers his rifle, the simple action a profound statement of his intentions. He offers her a half-smile, a gesture of peace, and a silent acknowledgement of their shared humanity. The woman's eyes widen slightly in surprise. The corners of her lips twitch, the barest hint of a return to the long-forgotten muscle memory of a smile. This single, silent interaction, a shared glance and a tentative gesture, shatters the narrative of the all-consuming conflict. It is a moment of profound hope in the midst of utter despair. For the first time in months, Ben feels something other than the crushing weight of war. He feels a connection, a shared understanding. It is a feeling that will change everything for both of them in the days to come. The first domino has fallen, and a new and surprising story is about to unfold. But as the day darkens, and the women are led away to a temporary holding area, Ben is left with a single troubling question. What happens next? What do you do with an enemy you can't bring yourself to hate? Night descends on the temporary encampment, a canvas of deep black broken only by the cold, stark light of a few generators. The air is frigid, carrying the smell of pine and damp earth. Ben and Jack are on guard duty, their silhouettes dark against the flickering light of a small fire. The German women are held in a separate, albeit rudimentary enclosure, a stark symbol of their otherness. They huddle together for warmth, a quiet, almost spectral presence. Ben finds his gaze constantly drawn to their enclosure. He can't shake the image of the young woman from earlier, the look in her eyes that mirrored his own fatigue. He remembers her name, a name he'd heard an officer call out during processing, Elsa. The name feels too personal, too human. He shivers, but it has nothing to do with the cold. It's the unsettling feeling of his worldview shifting, of the black and white lines of his world bleeding into a confusing, dangerous gray. Narrator. The night offered a time for reflection, a temporary reprieve from the relentless forward momentum of the war. For the GIs, it was a time to process the day's events, to grapple with the dissonance between the enemy they were told to hate and the human beings they were encountering. The war had been a grinding, dehumanizing machine. It had stripped away the individual and replaced it with a uniform. But here, in the cold of the German night, the uniform was gone. All that was left was the human. And with that revelation came a profound and troubling set of questions. How do you maintain the will to fight when you are confronted with the humanity of your enemy? How do you hold on to your hatred when you are met with a gesture of kindness or a look of fear that you understand all too well? Jack, sensing Ben's unease, nudges him with his elbow. He looks over at the enclosure and then back at Ben, a knowing look on his face. Jack, don't think about it too much, kid. It's just the war. It's almost over. They're just the last of them. Ben, his voice is low, almost a whisper. They're just women, Jack. They aren't soldiers. Jack, he sighs, exhaling a cloud of cold air. Yeah, I know. But they were part of it, Ben. They worked for the Reich. You can't forget that. We can't. Narrator. Jack's words were a reminder of the core truth of their situation. Regardless of their role, these women were complicit in a regime that had brought the world to its knees. The concept of collective guilt, a powerful and pervasive idea, hung in the air like a thick fog. But for Ben, it was a concept that felt too large, too abstract to apply to the quiet, weary woman whose eyes he could still see in the darkness. The personal had become a powerful counter-narrative to the political. The night stretches on, a slow, agonizing crawl of time. Ben's internal debate rages on. He remembers the stories he'd been told about the cruelty of the German people, the propaganda posters that depicted them as monstrous, inhuman creatures. But every time he looked at the quiet enclosure, those images felt like a lie, a distant, half-forgotten fabrication. In the quiet, he hears a low, whimpering sound coming from the enclosure. He stands up, his movement slow and deliberate. Jack watches him, a warning unspoken in his eyes. Ben ignores him. He approaches the fence, his body tense, his senses on high alert. He sees one of the women, a young girl no older than 16, her face buried in her knees, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. A wave of profound empathy washes over him. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small, worn chocolate bar he'd been saving. It was a small thing, a luxury in a world of deprivation. He holds it out through the barbed wire, a silent offering. Narrator. This simple act, this offering of a small, insignificant piece of chocolate, was a revolutionary act. It was a rejection of the established order, a silent rebellion against the dehumanization of war. It was a gesture of shared humanity, a recognition that the pain and suffering were not a monopoly of one side. The girl looks up, her eyes red and swollen. She stares at the chocolate, and then at Ben's outstretched hand. Her face is a mixture of profound shock and suspicion. The other women watch, their faces a tableau of guarded curiosity. Then Elsa, the young woman from before, steps forward. She says something to the girl in German, her voice a low, soothing murmur. The girl hesitates and then, slowly, tentatively, reaches out and takes the chocolate. Their fingers brush, a brief, electrifying moment of contact. A fragile, unspoken truce is forged in the darkness. The girl's lips tremble. She manages a tiny, almost imperceptible nod of thanks. Ben nods back, a small, weary smile on his face. For a moment, the chasm of language and culture and war disappears. The chasm of mutual animosity has been bridged by a single simple act of kindness. The moment is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and human connection can still find a way to break through. But the next day will bring new challenges and new truths. The U.S. 7th Army's orders were explicit, but what happens when you decide to ignore the orders and listen to your conscience instead? And what will they do when they are told to march the women away to an unknown fate? The morning dawns gray and bleak. The sky is a flat, monotonous expanse of concrete. The air is colder, the dampness seeping into Ben's bones. The temporary camp is a flurry of activity. Jeeps come and go, their engines groaning, their tires kicking up mud. Ben and his company are given a new directive. The prisoners, both male and female, are to be transported to a larger, more permanent holding facility farther south. The news brings a sense of grim finality. This was it. The last time he would see the women. The last time he would see Elsa. The thought sends a pang of something akin to grief through him. He looks over at the women's enclosure. They are lined up, their meager belongings clutched tightly in their hands. Their faces are pale and drawn, but there is a quiet, hardened defiance in their eyes. Ben can see Elsa at the front of the line. She meets his gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The previous night's kindness had created a bond, a fragile thread connecting them across the vast divide of the war. Now that thread was about to be broken. Narrator. The bureaucracy of war, cold and impersonal, was about to run its course. The transfer of prisoners was a routine matter, a necessary logistical step. But for the individuals involved, it was a moment of profound significance. For the GIs, it was a final act of separation, a last opportunity to perform an act of kindness, or a final moment to harden their hearts. For the women, it was a moment of profound uncertainty, an inexorable march toward an unknown future. The small, isolated world of the temporary camp, with its quiet moments of shared humanity, was about to be dismantled. As the transfer begins, a new element is introduced. A gruff, officious-looking captain arrives, his uniform pressed, his face a hard mask of rigid military discipline. He is the opposite of the war-weary GIs who have been living in the mud and the ruins. He oversees the loading of the prisoners onto the trucks, his voice sharp and demanding. He barks an order, and a young soldier, barely more than a boy, fumbles with a rope, trying to secure a box. The captain, in a fit of impatience, shoves the boy roughly. Ben and Jack exchange a look. This was a different kind of war. This was the war of bureaucracy, of power, of rank. Ben, his stomach churning, watches as the captain approaches the women's line. He says something to them in a rapid, impatient tone. The women, understanding, begin to shuffle forward. But as they do, one of the older women, her face a web of wrinkles and sorrow, stumbles. She drops her small bundle and a few of her possessions, a child's small wooden doll, a faded photograph, spill out onto the muddy ground. She cries out, her voice a thin, reedy sound of despair. The captain, unmoved, simply gestures to the soldier behind her to keep the line moving. The old woman, on her knees, desperately tries to gather her things. Ben, without thinking, breaks rank. He moves toward her, his mind a blank, his only impulse to help. Jack grabs his arm. Jack, Ben, don't! He's looking! Ben shakes off Jack's arm, his eyes fixed on the old woman. He kneels down beside her, ignoring the captain's sharp intake of breath. He quickly helps her gather her things, his movements gentle and deliberate. He places the small doll in her hand, his fingers briefly brushing hers. The old woman looks up at him, her eyes filled with a profound and simple gratitude. The captain, his face now a thundercloud of fury, strides over. He grabs Ben by the shoulder and jerks him to his feet. Captain, what in the hell do you think you're doing, Private? Don't you know the rules? Ben looks the captain in the eye, his own gaze unwavering. He doesn't say a word, his silence a powerful form of defiance. The captain, unused to such insubordination, is momentarily speechless. The tension is palpable. Jack, moving quickly, steps between them. Jack, sir, he was just helping the old woman. She dropped her stuff. We're just trying to keep things moving. The captain glares at Ben, a silent threat in his eyes. He is a man accustomed to absolute control, and Ben's small act of kindness has challenged that control. He spits on the ground, a final act of contempt, and turns to give a new order. The incident is over, but something has changed. Ben's actions had not gone unnoticed. The German women, their eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and quiet awe, had witnessed the exchange. They had seen an American soldier choose kindness over command, empathy over the brutal logic of war. Elsa, in particular, watches Ben with a new look in her eyes, a look of cautious respect, of a fragile belief in the goodness of humanity. The small, silent act of defiance, the simple gesture of helping a fallen enemy, has created an unspoken allegiance. But the captain will not forget Ben's defiance. He will be watching, and when they reach the permanent holding facility, the women will be subjected to the full impersonal force of the military machine. The question is, what will Ben do when he's forced to watch a new kind of cruelty, a bureaucratic cruelty far more chilling than the violence of the battlefield? And will his act of defiance put him on a path that could lead to court-martial, or even worse? The trucks rumble on, a long, snaking convoy of military vehicles against the backdrop of a broken landscape. The journey is a long and miserable one. Rain begins to fall, a cold, persistent drizzle that turns the dirt road into a slick river of mud. The German women are packed into the back of a canvas-covered truck, their faces gaunt, their bodies shivering from the cold. Ben and Jack follow in their Jeep, a part of the rear guard. The mood is somber. the air heavy with the unspoken weight of the day's events. Jack, ever the pragmatist, is quiet, his mind on the next objective. Ben, however, is a storm of warring emotions. The captain's fury, the old woman's gratitude, and the silent, knowing glance from Elsa replay in his mind on a continuous loop. He feels a profound and growing sense of moral isolation. He's an American soldier, but he feels no solidarity with the captain's cold indifference. He feels a kinship with the defeated, with the vulnerable, with the women huddled in the truck ahead of him. The simple act of helping the old woman has set him apart. And he feels the chilling truth of his new reality. He is alone in his convictions. Narrator. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, but so too is the path to moral courage. For Private Ben Carter, his simple act of kindness was a dangerous detour from the sanctioned road of military conduct. It had exposed a fissure in the seemingly solid moral foundation of the war. The soldiers were trained to follow orders, to see the world in simple terms of good and evil, us and them. But Ben had dared to see the world in shades of gray, to recognize the shared humanity of his supposed enemy. This was not a simple act of compassion. It was a radical, dangerous act of rebellion. The convoy finally arrives at the new holding facility. It is a grim, sprawling complex of barracks, surrounded by towering fences and guard towers. The air is thick with the scent of damp concrete and the low, murmuring sound of thousands of voices. It is a place of systematic organization, of dehumanizing efficiency. The German men are separated and sent to one section. The women are herded into a different, equally desolate compound. The captain, a man who relished control, oversees the process with a cold, almost clinical detachment. He barks an order for the women to be searched, a humiliating and invasive procedure. The GIs assigned to the task, most of them young and visibly uncomfortable, carry out the order with a grim efficiency. Ben, watching from a distance, feels a sick knot of rage tighten in his stomach. He sees Elsa being led away, her shoulders squared, her chin held high, a silent defiance in every line of her body. He can't watch. He turns away, his face a mask of impotent fury. The sight of her quiet dignity in the face of such a demeaning act is a physical pain. He feels a powerful need to do something, anything, to reclaim the humanity that is being systematically stripped away. Narrator. The institutional cruelty of the camp was more chilling than the chaotic brutality of the battlefield. It was a calculated form of psychological warfare designed to break the spirit, to strip away identity and replace it with a prisoner number. The war had ended, but a new, more subtle kind of conflict had begun. The conflict between conscience and command, between empathy and the dehumanizing logic of bureaucracy. And for Ben, a young man raised on a steady diet of American ideals, this new reality was a bitter and indigestible pill. He was witnessing a slow, agonizing death of the very principles he'd been fighting for. Ben finds himself on guard duty outside the women's barracks. The night is cold and silent, punctuated only by the rhythmic crunch of his boots on the gravel. He stands watch, his gaze fixed on the darkened windows. He imagines the scene inside, the women, huddled together for warmth, their lives reduced to a small, cold, and impersonal space. He knows what he has to do. He pulls a small box of rations out of his pack, canned meat, bread, a tin of coffee. He walks slowly to the rear of the barracks, his heart hammering in his chest. He can hear the captain's warnings echoing in his mind, the threat of court-martial, the possibility of a dishonorable discharge. He doesn't care. He places the box of rations on the ground, close to the wall. He knocks softly on the wooden wall, the sound a small, almost imperceptible summons. He hears a rustling inside, the low whisper of voices. A few moments pass, and then he hears the soft, gentle scrape of a window being opened from the inside. A hand, small and thin, reaches out and pulls the box inside. He sees a flash of blonde hair in the darkness. It's Elsa. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to. The simple act, the shared risk, the silent exchange is a language all its own. Their eyes meet in the darkness, a silent moment of shared understanding. He gives her a small, tight smile. She responds with a slow, almost imperceptible nod of her head. He can see a ghost of the smile he'd seen on her face that first day. The simple gesture is a revolutionary act. It is a rejection of the institution of the camp, a testament to the fact that even here, in this place of inhumanity, the human spirit can still find a way to connect. He turns and walks away, a new sense of purpose in his stride. He knows the risks. He knows he's on his own. He knows the captain is watching. But he also knows that he can no longer be the man the war wants him to be. He is now and forever a man who has chosen compassion over command. But what happens when the captain discovers his secret? And what will Ben do when he finds out that Elsa's connection to the war is far deeper, far more complex than he could ever have imagined? A truth that will challenge everything he thinks he knows about the nature of his enemy and his own sense of justice. The morning routine in the camp is a monotonous ballet of order and control. The women are lined up for roll call, their faces a sea of pale uniformity. The captain, a hawk-like figure, walks the lines, his eyes missing nothing. He stops in front of Elsa. He speaks to her in a low, clipped tone of German. She responds, her voice calm and even. The conversation is a mystery to Ben, but he can see the captain's face tighten with something more than just his usual contempt. He is watching her, analyzing her, and Ben has a chilling premonition that something is wrong. The captain then gestures to a guard, and the guard takes Elsa away, leading her toward the commandant's building. A wave of cold fear washes over Ben. He knows instinctively that this is not a routine interrogation. This is different. Narrator. The war may have ended, but the hunt for war criminals had only just begun. The Allied forces were engaged in a massive effort to root out the true perpetrators of the Holocaust and other Nazi atrocities. They were looking for the high-ranking officials, the men and women who had committed the most heinous crimes. The camp, with its seemingly endless supply of former German combatants and civilians, was a fertile ground for their search. The captain, a man of ambition and rigid principles, saw an opportunity for advancement, a way to prove his value to the newly formed military government. He was a hunter, and he had found his prey. Ben, in a state of growing panic, approaches Jack. He describes the scene, the captain's look of grim purpose, the cold, silent manner in which Elsa was led away. Jack listens, his face growing serious. He knows the look on a hunter's face. He knows what the captain is capable of. He knows this isn't just about a woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He shakes his head, a grim look on his face. Jack, he's probably got a dossier on her. I've seen them before. They get intelligence from captured documents, from other prisoners. He's looking for a score. He wants to find a collaborator, someone to make an example of. The truth of Jack's words lands with a sickening thud in Ben's stomach. A collaborator, a traitor, a war criminal. The image of Elsa, the quiet, weary woman with the haunted eyes, clashes violently with the new, terrifying label Jack has just given her. But the more he thinks about it, the more he realizes he can't accept it. He's seen her fear. He's seen her kindness. He's seen her vulnerability. He can't reconcile the two images. He realizes the only way to know the truth is to find out. He leaves Jack and, using his connections in the motor pool, makes his way to the administrative building. He finds a supply sergeant he's helped out with a few things in the past. He offers the man a few cigarettes in exchange for a few minutes alone with the files. The sergeant, a man of few questions, accepts the cigarettes and walks away, leaving Ben alone in a room filled with the grim, systematic records of a fallen empire. Narrator. In the quiet of the administration office, surrounded by the bureaucratic detritus of the war, Ben begins his frantic search. He flips through folders, his fingers trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. He finds a file labeled POW 1274. He opens it, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The name on the file is Elsa Schmidt. He finds a small, grainy photograph of her, the same quiet, sad face he'd seen every day. But as he reads on, the words on the page begin to paint a different picture. The file lists her as a member of the SS Helferinnen, the women who served as auxiliaries for the dreaded SS, the women who worked for the monstrous regime. He feels a crushing wave of betrayal, a cold, sickening sense of naivete. He had seen a victim, a fellow human being. The file, however, paints a different picture. It gives her a number, a designation, a grim and damning label. She was not a victim. She was an enemy. a member of the most hated and feared organization in the Third Reich. He sits back, his mind a numb, churning vortex of emotion. All the kindness, all the shared moments, the silent glances, had they all been a lie? A clever act? He feels a profound and bitter sense of having been played, of having given his trust and his compassion to a person who had, in some way, been complicit in the very evils he had fought to defeat. He closes the file, his hands shaking. He has to get out of the room. He has to get away from the cold, damning truth. He stumbles out into the night, the cold rain a bitter relief against his face. He is a man adrift, his moral compass spinning wildly out of control. He had found the truth, but it was a truth he was not prepared for. The beautiful, sad-eyed woman was not what she seemed. But as he walks away, another truth, a darker, more troubling truth, is revealed. A tiny handwritten note on the last page of the file, a note he hadn't seen, a note he hadn't read. A note that will change everything he knows about Elsa and the nature of her so-called crime. A note that would make him question his own sense of right and wrong, and force him to make a choice between his duty as a soldier and his conviction as a man. The night is a thick, suffocating blanket of darkness. Ben, his mind in turmoil, walks the perimeter of the camp, the cold rain a constant, miserable companion. He can't shake the words from the file. SS Helferinnen. He sees her face in the rain-slicked darkness, a ghost of her smile, a haunting echo of her quiet dignity. He feels a bitter, soul-deep sense of disillusionment. All his kindness, all his compassion had been a foolish, naive gesture. He had risked his military career and perhaps his life for a woman who was, by all accounts, a part of the evil he had fought to destroy. He feels a crushing sense of betrayal, a cold, lonely isolation. Narrator. The discovery was a bitter truth, a profound challenge to the narrative he had built for himself. The moral clarity he had found in his simple act of kindness had been shattered. The enemy was not an idea. The enemy was a person. And that person, it seemed, was not to be trusted. The war had taught him to be wary, to be distrustful. But in a moment of naive idealism, he had let down his guard. And now he felt the painful sting of that mistake. He was a soldier, and a soldier's job was to kill the enemy, not to offer them chocolate and comfort. He is about to turn back, to abandon his post and his convictions when a soft, desperate voice calls out from the darkness. It's Jack. He is standing a few yards away, his face grim, a flashlight in his hand. He holds up the file, the same file Ben had been reading. He's seen it. He knows the truth now, too. Jack, I went back for it, Ben. I saw you leave the office in a daze. I knew something was wrong. So I went back, and I read it. The whole thing. Ben stands in the rain, silent, his body slumped in defeat. He can't bring himself to look at Jack. He feels a profound sense of shame. Jack, his voice is low and somber. You didn't read the whole thing, did you? The last part. The part the captain probably didn't even see. The part that was written by the last officer who processed her. Ben looks up, a flicker of something, a faint spark of hope in his eyes. He shakes his head. He hadn't seen it. He had been too consumed by the betrayal. Jack. He shines the flashlight on the page, pointing to the tiny scribbled note at the bottom. It says, Suspect's father was a high-ranking SS officer. Her family was being held at a prison camp. She was forced to join the Helferinnen to secure their release. The information seems plausible. She provided us with key intelligence about the camp's operations. The intel led to a successful rescue operation and the capture of a few high-ranking officers. Recommend she be considered for rehabilitation, not prosecution. The words hit Ben with the force of a physical blow. The crushing weight of betrayal is replaced by a profound sense of relief, a sudden and blinding flash of clarity. She wasn't a collaborator. She was a hero. A woman who had sacrificed her own freedom to save her family, and in doing so, had provided vital intelligence to the Allied forces. She was not a part of the system. She was a victim of it, a survivor who had fought it from the inside. The simple truth of her story, a truth that had been buried beneath the weight of bureaucracy and prejudice, shines a bright, piercing light on the dark, cynical narrative he had just built for himself. The file, with its cold, damning label, had obscured the real truth. A truth that was far more complex and far more human than a simple act of collaboration. Narrator. The truth was not a matter of black and white. It was a kaleidoscope of human experience, of impossible choices and profound courage. The captain, in his zeal to find a villain, had overlooked the hero. He had seen a uniform and a designation, but he had failed to see the humanity behind it. Ben, in his compassion, had seen the humanity first. He had seen the truth even when he didn't have all the facts. His instincts had been right all along. But the truth was a dangerous thing, a weapon that could be used against him, against her, and against anyone who challenged the rigid, unforgiving narrative of the war. Ben and Jack, a silent, powerful bond now forged between them. Walk back to the barracks. They know what they have to do. They have to get the information to the right person, a person who will see the truth for what it is. They have to save her. They have to make sure her courage is rewarded, not punished. They know the risks. They know the captain will fight them. He will not want to lose his prize, his public example of justice. But they also know that they can't turn their backs on her. They have seen her humanity. They have seen her courage. And in seeing it, they have found their own. Ben walks to the commandant's office, the file clutched tightly in his hand, a new sense of purpose in every step. He is no longer a soldier fighting a war. He is a man fighting for justice. But as he reaches the door, he hears the captain's angry, triumphant voice from inside. You see, sir? The evidence is all here. She is one of them. We have to make an example of her. Ben stops, his hand on the doorknob. He knows now, with chilling certainty, that he is not just fighting for Elsa's life. He is fighting for the soul of the war itself, a final, desperate battle between cruelty and compassion. And he knows, too, that the captain will not give up without a fight. The question is, how far will Ben go to save the life of a woman who, in a different world, would have been his enemy, but in this world had become his reason for believing in the very humanity he thought he'd lost forever?